What a fun, thrilling race to kick off this year's playoffs. Hey there, race fans. It's Race Day Top 5 with me, Frank 5. Atlanta Motor Speedway. It's fast. It's furious. We bunch them all together and race side by side every single lap of the race. And yesterday, it was a show, folks. The first race of the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs kicked off at Atlanta Motor Speedway, and yesterday we had pack racing and side-by-side battles all day long. It was great racing all the way up until the checkered flag, and one playoff driver left Atlanta very happy as they punched their ticket to the next round. Let's get into all that went down in Atlanta. Number 1. Logano on top. Joey Logano captures his second win of the 2024 season, winning yesterday's Quaker State 400 at Atlanta Motor Speedway, beating out Daniel Suarez, Ryan Blaney, Christopher Bell, and Alex Bowman for the victory as the race ended under caution. A good start to the playoffs for Joey Logano and the 22 team. Yesterday, Team Penske was very strong all day long. Logano's teammates were really good running up front all day long. Joey was also running up front for the majority of the race yesterday, but wasn't able to lead at the early part of the race. I think he was just feeling out his race car, just trying to figure out which lane was moving, which cars were handling well that he could follow behind versus guys that weren't handling well. He just kind of just stayed in his lane pretty much a lot of the race yesterday. Didn't make any erratic moves and didn't do anything out there that made a lot of drivers unhappy with the way he was racing out there. Even though they're all bunched together, you don't know who exactly is making, a right move versus who's making a move that's going to make someone frustrated on the radio. But Logano ran a smart race yesterday, and towards the very end of the race, he got himself in the right lanes when it mattered most and got within the top 3 in the final 10 laps of the race. And when we'll restart with about 6 laps to go, he was racing 3 wide for the lead for 2 consecutive laps against Daniel Suarez and Ty Gibbs. And any one of those guys knew that a win and you're guaranteed a spot into the next round of the playoffs. And Logano knew he wanted it badly because he knows that he comes into these playoffs with limited playoff points because they haven't won many stages this year. They did get the win earlier this year at Nashville, but they just needed to get some momentum going on their side. In the last couple of races, the 22 team of Joey Logano has been, decent but not great. But yesterday was a solid performance by him in this 22 team when he was able to take the lead on the overtime restart after a caution occurred with 2 laps left in regulation when Noah Gragson wrecked on the back straightaway. Logano set himself on the front row next to Suarez, and Logano got a good push from behind, and he was able to propel himself into the lead and then did some decisive blocking on the last lap and carry that all the way through turn 4 while a wreck happened right behind him, and he was able to carry it all the way to the start-finish line and get the win and lock himself into the playoffs. And now he's the only driver that knows that he's guaranteed a spot into the next round of these playoffs. We don't have anybody else that locked themselves in considering how many points that they've earned, but I got a feeling we will in the next couple races. But a big shout out to the 22 team and Joey Logano. Really, ever since the summer started, the 22 team and the Fords in general have been getting their act together. When I was talking about the Fords earlier this year in the spring, they were struggling with the new body, and I wondered, what's going on with this team? Why are they starting out so slow? And it wasn't until the summertime when the Fords started to get their act together, when guys like Austin Cindric and Ryan Blaney won, and of course Joey Logano won the race at Nashville, despite all those overtime restarts. Guess what? We had another overtime restart yesterday to decide the race, but it wasn't as much as the race at Nashville this year, even though there were some guys in this race that were kind of tight on fuel, including Logano. Everybody was able to make it to the end in one piece on as far as gas mileage is concerned. A nice win for the 22 team and Joey Logano, and they have officially locked themselves in the next round. And I guarantee you, considering the even number of years, Joey Logano is a threat, folks. Number 2, Suarez falls short of the sweep. Daniel Suarez was just 1 spot shy of locking himself into the next round of the playoffs, and he was 1 spot shy of sweeping both Atlanta races this year. If you remember early this year, the last time we were here, we had perhaps the race of the year, and up until the Kansas race, the finish of the year, when there were 3 cars racing side by side coming off of turn 4 to the checkered flag with Daniel Suarez up towards the wall, Kyle Busch in the middle, and Ryan Blaney on the inside. Those 3 crossed the start-finish line, looked like fairly even, but when they looked at the scoring monitors, Daniel Suarez was the one that came out on top by 7 1/1000ths of a second ahead of Ryan Blaney, besting him and locking himself into this year's playoffs. And yesterday, he came oh so close again of winning again at this track and getting himself in the next round. But despite falling short, it was a solid day for the 99 team. He ran up at the front earlier, led a couple of laps. He dropped back a little bit because of a penalty, I think, that put him back there, or some repair work because they had some contact on pit road during a pit stop exchange under yellow. But he was able to work his way back up to the field because he had plenty of fuel to make it to the end. He had a little bit better tires than some of the guys he was racing around, which is why he was able to stay up there and not fall back in the pack. But he just did everything right yesterday, even though he got passed on the last lap by the 22 team heading into turn number 1 and literally having to play defense to try to hold the best spot he could possibly hold on to at the very end of the race. He was able to get out there with a solid runner-up finish. And lately, things have been going well for Daniel Suarez. Really, the whole year has been good for him. To get that win in Atlanta early this year, he got married during this season. He got an extension with Trackhouse Racing to stay until 2025. And he's also become a U.S. citizen after he passed his test to become a standing U.S. citizen. It's just been a really good year and been good momentum for Suarez lately. Aside from the fire at Daytona and the rough finish that he had last weekend at Darlington not really being a factor whatsoever, the last couple of weeks have been very good to him. I mean, the Richmond race, we saw how good he was. The Michigan race, he was pretty good there too. And yesterday, he did a very good job coming out there with a solid result and comes away being 22 points above the cutoff line. Now, he's ninth in the standings, which you think something bad could happen in any of these next two races. Well, a result like yesterday in those points helps him going forward in these next two. And if he can just at least perform well and earn an average 10th to 15th place finish in these next two races, then he should be good to make it to the next round. So, despite coming up short, a good day nonetheless for Suarez and company. Number 3, a solid day for a lot of our playoff drivers. Of course, a lot of the guys coming into this race knew that they had to run well and finish well in order to feel good about themselves in this opening round. And a lot of guys took care of business yesterday. Let's kick things off with third place finisher Ryan Blaney in the 12 team, our defending Cup champion, trying to defend that title. Yesterday, he was running up at the front and was the best car in stage 1, having that clean air, being able to block whoever was trying to come from behind him and get a massive run and shoot to the outside or inside. He was able to block them, and he came away with the stage win. Stage number 2, he stayed up there and stayed in the top 5, but then the final stage at the beginning, he got caught up in a wreck off of turn number 2 when Chris Buescher got loose somehow off of the corner and clipped the 12 car, but Blaney was able to hold control of the car until he got into the side of Martin Truex Jr., but despite all that, there wasn't much damage to the Dent Wizard Ford, despite a couple of dents. Get it? But despite that, he was able to charge his way back up through the field from the tail end of the field all the way up there and had a shot to win the race. But despite the not having a lot of pushes at the very end and not really getting help from the outside lane, he came away with a third place finish, but that is still, a very good performance by him and his team to recover from that wreck and getting that stage win earlier today, solid stage points and a third place finish. They got to feel very happy about their chances to defend the title and carry themselves through this first round. Then we have Christopher Bell, who we didn't really talk about much yesterday. He didn't run up at the front in stage number 1 because they were just kind of riding around and trying to, find some handling with their car because it wasn't running well at the beginning. Then he was able to get himself towards the top 10, actually inside the top 10 at the end of stage 2 and pick up a couple extra playoff points. Then he fell back after he had a penalty during a pit stop for pitting outside the box. But, like other cars, he was able to charge his way through the field and came away with a 4th place finish. A good performance by Bell and the team. Then Alex Bowman had by far, other than perhaps Ryan Blaney up until that wreck and he was able to recover, Alex Bowman was perhaps the best running car out of all the playoff contenders yesterday. He never left the top 15 once yesterday. That car was so strong, being able to stay up there inside the top 5, inside the top 10, had a chance to try to take the stage win in stage 2, but just didn't have enough help from behind him to get himself up there, but he still came away with a great performance. A lot of people have been speculating about whether or not can he make it through this first round, and there was some speculation this week about whether or not he was secure as far as this 48 car for next year. But he and Vice Chairman Jeff Gordon shut down those rumors immediately. And the way you could do that is have a solid performance like they did yesterday. It's a good start for Alex Bowman and his team. Then we have our regular season champ, Tyler Reddick, who, like Bell, we didn't say much about yesterday. He was just hanging around the top 15, top 20, not doing really anything. But then when we got into the final 40 laps of the race, that white and black number 45 car was able to find his way inside the top 10. Couldn't really get a lot of help up there and try to get up there and have a shot at the win. But to come away with a 6th place finish, given where they were running earlier in the race, a good performance by Reddick. Then we have Georgia boy Chase Elliott, who the last couple of races have been kind of on a pedestal, kind of halfway good, halfway not so good. Of course, the wreck at Daytona kind of hurt them in their chances to try to win the regular season championship. But yesterday, sponsoring a special paint scheme for his foundation, Elliott came away with a solid result yesterday with an 8th place finish. Got some solid stage points, ran within the top 5, top 10 pretty much the entire day yesterday. They just had good speed in the car. Not winning speed, but solid speed to get a good result. There was one moment on the last lap where he got into the back of Ross Chastain, sent him up into the wall, and he fell back, and of course there was a wreck that happened behind him, so I'm sure Elliott kind of feels a little bad about what happened. But despite that, an 8th place finish and solid points day, at the end of the day, nothing to be upset about. And then we have William Byron, the other member of the Hendrick camp. 3 out of the 4 Hendrick cars finished inside the top 10 yesterday. Byron didn't really have a race-winning car like, a lot of other people thought he would probably have, considering he was the first repeat winner on this Atlanta configuration yesterday, prior to Joey Logano winning for the 2nd time. But Byron yesterday was able to get some solid stage points and a solid 9th place finish and try to, get some momentum back on their side. I thought they had a good run going last week until they were caught up in that late race yellow. Yesterday, no incidents whatsoever, a solid points day. And then Austin Cindric, what a day he had. Perhaps by far his best run of the season. Yes, Austin Cindric won at Gateway earlier this year, but that was also because of fuel mileage. But then again, he actually did run well pretty all day, that entire race. But yesterday, he had a really good race car. All the Penske cars showed up yesterday. It was a clean sweep of the race. Blaney won stage number 1. Austin Cindric won stage 2, and of course, Joey Logano won the race. But Cindric was able to control the pack in stage 2 and lead and pretty much block anywhere anybody was trying to get a run from the bottom to the top. He just did a great job yesterday. He did fall back a little bit during one of the pit stops, and he really was not able to contend for the win for the rest of the race, but he was able to recover and get a 10th place finish and keep him 7th in the point standings after yesterday, 20 plus points above the cutoff line. A solid day for the 2 team, and just a great day for a lot of those playoff drivers yesterday. Number 4, while some playoff drivers did well, others didn't fare well at all. I want to kick it off with Ty Gibbs, who late in the race looked like he had a chance to finally get his first Cup Series win in the Cup Series and lock himself into the next round of the playoffs. But unfortunately, on the restart prior to the overtime restart, he was running 3 wide with Suarez and Logano, and then all of a sudden, the guys behind him decided to shuffle him out, and he got kicked backwards and never recovered and got himself back up there to have a shot to win late, especially as the laps were dwindling down. End of the day, Ty Gibbs ended up with a top 20 finish, which is not bad, but certainly wasn't what they were looking for, especially considering where their position was toward the end of the race. They could have won the race, or they could have walked out there with a top 5, top 10 instead. They finished with a top 20. Then we have Brad Keselowski, a guy who's been really good at this type of drafting style racing in Atlanta. I thought he was going to be in the mix at the end of the race, but he just couldn't seem to get it anywhere up towards the front of the field. He was just stuck in the pack. I don't think they had a good handle on their car yesterday, and that's why he wasn't able to get up there and contend for the win. And because of that, he finds himself below the cutoff line, 1 point behind the 54 Ty Gibbs. Can that be made up in any of these next 2 races? Absolutely. But I've got a feeling they're pretty upset about what happened to their car yesterday. Then we have Denny Hamlin. Denny, where were you yesterday? It was not a good weekend for the 11 team. They had a problem in qualifying regarding a plug wire issue because their car was so slow. Something happened with the plug wire, so they had to swap it out. It started the back anyways because they were the slowest car in qualifying. But he hung at the back of the pack for a lot of the race because he wasn't happy with the handling of his car. And he said on the radio, I'm not going to get up there and race with these guys yet. I'm going to ride around, wait for things to shake out, and if we have a big one and I'm far back enough to avoid it, then I'll be able to push my way up toward the field towards the end of the race. But the sad part was there wasn't really a big wreck that took out a lot of race cars yesterday until the last lap of the race, where Hamlin was trying to charge his way up through the field and hopefully get a top 15 at least, yesterday, but unfortunately he was caught up in that wreck on the last lap that ended up with a damaged car and finishing 24th. He did finish the race, but buddy, you're a championship contender. You know how many people have been harping on you the last couple of years because of how strong you've been every single year and haven't been able to contend, or you've been able to contend but not been able to secure that championship that you are so longing to try to finally win. And get the narrative off about how he can't win the championship. He, unfortunately, comes up short when it matters the most. Well, dude, you can't run for 20th place the way you were running yesterday. You should have tried to get up there and try to contend and get a top 10 finish. If he had got a top 10 finish yesterday, we wouldn't be having this conversation about, his decision making. I just don't know what they were thinking yesterday. They didn't score any stage points, and he's only 2 points above the cutoff line. Because let's not forget, he did get penalized a few weeks ago for violation of the engine components that he ran afoul of, and he was not able to, he took them to the wrong engine department and should have taken them to NASCAR, but instead took the TRD and got penalized a lot of points. So they're 2 points above the cutoff line. They better perform these next couple of races in the 11 team. And then there's Harrison Burton, who yesterday actually ran in the top 15 and did a good job, but he just got kicked back late, and he was a part of that last lap wreck and wasn't able to cross the start-finish line. And he's in a hole right now, and he's going to have to try to dig out of that hole. And even though the win at Daytona, I don't know if he's got enough to escape out of this hole and advance himself in the next 2 races. But we've seen stranger things. Then Martin Truex Jr., the playoffs have started, and he's officially in his final year. And it looked like yesterday he was going to come away with a top 10 finish at least because he was having a good charge from the rear of the field where he started because of changing plug wires to get himself up there and have a shot at a solid result. But as I mentioned earlier, Ryan Blaney's incident off of turn 2 down the back straightaway with Chris Buescher. Sadly, Martin Truex Jr. was a part of it as Blaney was trying to hang onto the car. He came down the track, hit the 19 car, damaged the right front wheel, and Martin Truex Jr. was officially out of contention for the race win, or at least a solid finish, and he ended up retiring the car with about 12 laps to go in the race because of the damage he sustained. He said it's not competitive enough, it's not going to be able to run the rest of the race, so therefore Martin Truex Jr. ended the day in the garage, and he finds himself in a points hole because of that incident. So a tough break for MTJ. But the big story of far as playoff drivers' demise yesterday was towards the end of stage 1, where Kyle Larson, who was running in about the 3rd position at the time, all of a sudden the back end snaps through the inside, and the car goes around and right up into the outside wall at turn 2. The car hit so hard it made me clench my teeth. It was so ugly to see. And if that wasn't bad enough, he got rear-ended by another playoff driver in Chase Briscoe, the man that had that walk-off win at Darlington last week to get himself into the playoffs. Both drivers with a nasty wreck towards the end of stage number 1. Thankfully, both of them were okay, because when you look at the 5 car, you're like, I can't believe he's able to walk out there with no injury whatsoever. Even Chase Briscoe's wreck. Those were some nasty, nasty hits. I'm thankful both are okay. But unfortunately, both of them did not have the result they were looking for. They finished 37th and 38th. And Kyle Larson came to this race with a comfortable points cushion because of all the wins he accumulated and all the stage points he has accumulated throughout this year. He's now 15 points above the cutoff line in 10th place. Now, a lot of people surprised he's still above the cutoff line given the fact that he wrecked? Yes, but not really because of, again, all those playoff points he accumulated. I think he can rebound from this. But you can't afford to have another bad race like that yesterday. In Briscoe, that one win, the lone win you have, and that wreck, got you in a hole too, and he's going to have to try to recover some way, somehow, in any of these next 2 races if he wants to continue to advance and give Stewart-Haas Racing at least another shot in their last year as a team to try to win a championship. And number 5, the racing yesterday. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I don't care what anybody says. This new Atlanta configuration and this type of racing is so much fun. It has me on the edge of my seat yesterday, watching these guys side by side, trying to hang on to their race cars. The pushes coming left and right. And the way these guys are running double and 3 wide towards the end of the race yesterday, I'm like, how are these guys not wrecking? How are we not having a big one with 10, 12 cars piled up? Given wherever they are on the racetrack until the very end of the race, obviously. That's one exception. They're all coming to the checkered flag. But how these guys are racing 2 and 3 wide in the final 30 laps amazes me. These guys did an amazing job putting on a show for the fans yesterday. It was a great race, a gritty race, all the way to the checkered flag. And early on in the race, of course, some guys, the handling was a factor where guys were spread out, not making many charges, just trying to ride it out until they got to that pit stop. Stage 2 at the beginning was really about fuel saving until they could maybe pit under green, but it never happened because we had a debris caution. But the racing yesterday was outstanding. No major wrecks, obviously, until the last lap. It was just good, competitive racing all day long yesterday. This new Atlanta surface is great. Now, maybe in a couple years when we get more age into this track, we don't have this type of racing anymore. So for the moment, we should still cherish this type of racing in Atlanta because it is one hell of a show. Now, the round of 16 continues on the next weekend as we go all the way up to Watkins Glen, New York, and that Watkins Glen International Road Course track where it's the super speedways of road courses. And what I mean by that, despite some of the sharp turns, the speeds there are high, and these guys are going to be on their game next week. We're bringing a little bit of a softer tire this week to also try to help out with some tire wear to, put a lot of bit of the control the race car back in the hands of the drivers to try to make this road course racing a little more entertaining because some of the races this year on road courses have been kind of dull, though the Chicago street course race, despite the rain, was fun to watch. So I'm looking forward to see what happens next week. Will a lot of our road course aces run up at the front and have a chance to win the race, or will somebody outside the box that you didn't expect coming take a victory next week? Will it be Shane Van Gisbergen who's going to be in the race next week? Or an AJ Allmendinger who's going to be in the race? Or any of our playoff drivers who have road course experience like Tyler Reddick, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Christopher Bell, or Austin Cindric come out on top next week? We shall see when we head all the way up to Watkins Glen. But I hope you all had a wonderful week. I hope you all enjoyed the first weekend of NFL football. And I can't wait for next weekend's race. So subscribe, like, and congrats once again to Joey Logano and the 22 team on their big win yesterday in Atlanta. Have a great week, everybody. Let's go racing.